Donald Trump loves breaking the law. It's kind of his whole thing, both as a private citizen and while unfortunately he has been president. Donald Trump is all about the criminality and the corruption, but he doesn't like being called out for it, which is unsurprising. People who are criminals usually don't like getting caught, and Donald Trump was just recently by a Republican judge, a Republican-appointed judge, who ripped him to shreds for one of the most disgusting criminal acts of his presidency, and it's got him pretty upset. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we get into the order that was passed down by this Republican-appointed judge, I want to hear from Jamie Raskin, who yesterday shared important and really impactful testimony about the attack and the assault that is coming from Donald Trump's DOJ on the rest of America, all to intimidate us in this clip right here.
We've got an anti-cruelty Constitution. The Eighth Amendment bans cruel and unusual punishment. We've got an anti-corruption Constitution. It guarantees due process to everyone. It guarantees equal protection under the laws, as well as freedom of speech and freedom of the press and free assembly, the right to petition government for redress of grievances, free exercise of religion, no establishment of religion. And so we say to the courts, as Ms. Cohen said, you're an important line of defense. I don't think that you're the last line of defense. I think the people will always be the last line of defense, but you're a significant line of defense for us right now. We have 68 court orders that have been rendered by federal district courts, preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders against all of the lawlessness that's taken place. And we hope that the U.S. Supreme Court, which we know Donald Trump bragged about having packed and stacked in order to overthrow Roe versus Wade and get the Dobbs decision. We know that the court may be in a different posture on some of these things, but we ask all of the justices to live their oaths of office to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law. I ask them, I ask everybody in Congress, I ask everybody in the country to go back and read the steel seizure case from 1952, where President Truman ordered the seizure of the steel mills in the middle of a war, in the middle of the Korean War. He said it was a national security crisis and we couldn't afford to have a strike and a standoff between the unions and the management. And so he just ordered that all of the steel mills be seized. And the Supreme Court came back with a remarkable decision saying the president gets his power only from either the explicit text of the Constitution or from Congress. And Congress had already rejected the idea that the president should have the power to seize the steel mills. And so the court said in a 6-3 decision, the Constitution doesn't grant you that power, and Congress forbade you that power. And Justice Jackson, in his famous concurrence, said, at that point, your power, Mr. President, is at its lowest ebb.
It is all about fear for Donald Trump. This is something that we talk about a lot, how insecure he is about himself, and so how he has to take it out on us. He knows his power is waning. He knows Republicans are turning on him. The only thing he has left is to try to break the law as much as possible and use the corrupt judges that he's put in place to do it. But there are still some left with a backbone willing to stand up to him, and that is what we saw in an article we're going to check out right here. Path of lawlessness. Reagan-appointed judge buries Trump DOJ in scathing ruling. Over the weekend, a Justice Department attorney was put on administrative leave after acknowledging in court that he'd never been given a satisfactory answer for why the U.S. government couldn't return a wrongfully deported immigrant from Venezuela who had been residing in Maryland. Now, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is scolding the DOJ's behavior in a new ruling. In a unanimous decision on Monday, the court denied President Donald Trump's administration's efforts to resist returning Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States by midnight on Monday, wrote Politico. An appointee of former President Ronald Reagan was particularly scathing in his reaction to government claims that it could not possibly bring Garcia back to the United States despite acknowledging his wrongful deportation. The government rightfully concedes that it was an error and a mistake to ignore the process, Wilkinson wrote, And if it is truly a mistake, one would expect the government to do what it can do to rectify it. Most of us attempt to undo to the extent that we can the mistakes that we have made. But to the best of my knowledge, the government has made no attempts here. The facts of this case thus present the potential for a disturbing loophole, namely that the government could whisk individuals to foreign prisons in violations of court orders and then contend, invoking its Article 2 powers, that it is no longer their custodian, and there's nothing that can be done. It takes no small amount of imagination to understand that this is a path of perfect lawlessness, one that courts cannot condone. The court also scolded the government for penalizing its own attorney, who it charged was being targeted for his candor to the court. Of note, in response to this candid response by the government attorney to the district court's inquiry, that attorney has been put on administrative leave, ostensibly for a lack of zealous advocacy, the ruling said in a footnote, citing the CNN report about the DOJ lawyer. This is clearly the intention of the Trump administration. This is what I've come back to. Intimidation. That is the point. They want to create these broad powers that they are consolidating in the White House so Donald Trump can do whatever he wants. And Republicans have, as they always are, been spineless in allowing Donald Trump to take those powers. That's what the tariff vote was all about. The Republicans are trying to claw back now that they're seeing Donald Trump wrecking not only the economy, but their political future ahead of the midterms, which unfortunately they care more about than their constituents. This is what Donald Trump wants. This is also, unfortunately, what he was able to achieve through the most corrupt court we have ever had in this country, which handed down a ruling that Donald Trump was pretty happy about in this crazed post right here. Trump wrote, "The Supreme Court has upheld the rule of law in our nation by allowing a president, whoever that may be, to be able to secure our borders and protect our families and our country itself. A great day for justice in America." That is not what happened. The Supreme Court, handpicked by Donald Trump, allowed him to continue with his unconstitutional action. Very clearly, that is what's happening here. And that little bit he tried to slide in, whoever that president may be, well, that doesn't apply. When Joe Biden wanted to do something that the court viewed as unconstitutional, like, I don't know, forgive student loans, it was a massive freakout and immediately put to a stop by this Supreme Court. Could Donald Trump do that? Probably, if he wanted to. When Joe Biden tried to find workarounds to make sure people had access to their reproductive freedom, the Supreme Court was always trying to obstruct him every step of the way. Donald Trump, on the other hand, can take whatever unconstitutional action he wants to deport lawful permanent residents and then oopsie and say, we can't get them back. That's the dynamic at play here. Donald Trump is being aided and abetted by this court to allow him to break the law. They are complicit. Talk about impeaching judges. Next time we have a Democratic president, I don't know, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito. Doesn't sound too bad to me. That's something for a different day. But this is what we're seeing right now. The intimidation of all branches of government, but especially the judiciary. Donald Trump is going after lawyers because he does not want anyone fighting back against him. And we saw one of those stories presented before Congress. Just a really devastating and scary clip right here.
You were fired hours after you refused to agree to the Deputy Attorney General's demand that you sign your name to a memo and that you recommend that Mel Gibson, a convicted domestic abuser who also happens to be a friend of Donald Trump and his special ambassador to Hollywood, get all of his gun rights restored. Is that right?
That's right.
And you refused to be complicit in that sequence of events because you had serious concerns. You said, quote, "He is the profile of exactly who you would not recommend for this type of relief," citing his history of domestic violent abuse, alcohol abuse, and so on. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you were fired just a few hours after you told the Deputy Attorney General that you could not go along with this request.
Within hours, yes.
Now they're disputing your account. They're calling you a liar. You filed a FOIA request to demonstrate exactly what happened. Have you gotten the documents back yet?
I have not gotten any of the communications between myself and members of Mr. Blanche's staff, which illustrate that everything I have ever said about this matter is true.
And we have some of your contemporaneous communications with your own colleagues that corroborate your account.
That's right. I did, pursuant to FOIA, get some documents that were in possession of the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and they also corroborate my account.
All right. Then they had sent 2 armed marshals to your home to try to intimidate you with a letter telling you not to come today. Why did you decide to come?
I came because I don't want to be complicit in what is happening inside the Department of Justice, which is the misuse of the resources of the department to do political favors for friends of the president, for loyalists, and I just don't believe that that's right, and I don't want to be part of it, so I feel that I need to speak up.
Your courage is heroic to us, and I want to say to you and your family, thank you, and we are with you, and we're going to stand by you. Just this past weekend, we saw another shocking example of retaliation. DOJ suspended the prosecutor who had stated in court that a man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia of Maryland, had been erroneously deported to El Salvador as an administrative error and imprisoned there, where he faces serious danger and gang violence. The judge in the case demanded that the Trump administration seek Garcia's return to the United States, and the administration is, despite confession of its error, arguing to prevent Mr. Garcia's return, saying he's out of the custody of the United States, and they wash the hands of the matter. Ms. Young, is there any doubt in your mind that this prosecutor's suspension was retaliation simply for speaking the truth in court, as this prosecutor was sworn to do?
That's what the facts seem to suggest.
Well, I think that all of these events should stir the conscience of America, and we thank you all for stepping forward now to sound a cry about what's taking place. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. I just want to put a fine point, Ms. Oyer, on your testimony. You applied the same standard, did you not, with reference to Mel Gibson, you would apply to anyone. That is, you looked at the facts to determine whether you should recommend restoration of gun rights. You didn't consider friendship with the president or any other impermissible consideration. You just looked at the facts. Is that right?
Well, Mr. Schiff, let me say that this is a project that was not within the normal purview of the Office of the Pardon Attorney. There was no real interest from this administration in considering the work that this office normally does, which is provide advice that is non-political in nature to the president about how to use his constitutional clemency power.
Fear. Again, that is what this is about. Intimidation. It's not about necessarily the actions the Trump administration can take, but what they can prevent you from doing against them. That's what they're focused on most of all. It is the pre-capitulation that they care so much about. Law firms, universities, folding, complying, bending the knee. It's what we can't have, and why it's so important for us to use our agency to fight back and make sure that these institutions know we're in the majority. You think Donald Trump is strong? Wait till you see us. And that's what we're going to be talking about on the show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.